I still remember the way she opened the door, not hurried, not surprised. Just steady. Like she'd already known I was coming. The smell of rain followed me inside, damp wood and something faintly floral, like the perfume that clung to her sweater. She stood in the doorway of her living room, arms crossed loosely, eyes moving over me as if she were measuring not my work, but my intention. "Roof leaks again?" I asked, trying to sound casual, wiping my boots on the mat. She smiled, not a full one, just the kind that barely reaches the corners of her lips. "Seems it only leaks when it wants attention," she said. There was something in her tone, half amusement, half tiredness. It made me want to fix more than just the roof. The afternoon light stretched across the hardwood floor, soft and golden. Her house was quiet, too quiet, like sound itself held its breath when she walked through a room. I followed her up the narrow staircase, toolbox in hand, trying not to notice how her hair caught the light or how her bare feet made no sound on the steps. She kept talking about the leak, how the rain kept finding its way in no matter what she patched, but my attention kept drifting. The back of her neck was slightly damp from the humidity, a strand of hair sticking to her skin. I looked away before she could turn around. "Do you always do this alone?" I asked. "Do what?" "Keep the place running." Her pause said more than any answer. Then softly, "Someone has to." That was the first moment I saw it, the quiet loneliness in her composure. Not sadness, exactly. Just the kind of stillness that comes from having to hold yourself together for too long. Up in the attic, the air was heavy with the smell of dust and old rain. I climbed onto the beam, careful with every step, while she stood below, watching. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of dripping water and my hammer tapping lightly against wood. Then she spoke again. "You're very careful," she said. I turned slightly, half smiling. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," she murmured. "Just rare." The way she said it made me lose my rhythm for a second. I almost dropped the nail. By the time I climbed down, my hands were smudged with tar, my shirt damp from the heat. She handed me a glass of water, her fingers brushing mine, light, fleeting, but enough to make something inside me stumble. Her eyes lingered a second too long. "You should take a break," she said. I wanted to tell her I wasn't tired. But the truth was, I didn't want to stop because stopping meant standing too close, looking too long. And I didn't know what that would do to me. "Maybe after one more section," I said. She nodded, but didn't move away. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "Who?" Her lips parted, then closed again. "No one you'd know." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air before a storm. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere below, the soft hum of rain returning against the windowpane. And then, a sound from downstairs. A knock at the door. She froze. The spell broke like glass. Her eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. "Stay here," she whispered, turning toward the stairs. As her footsteps faded, I stood in the half-dark attic, my pulse unsteady, rain still dripping, tools forgotten at my feet, realizing I hadn't just come to fix something broken. Something inside me already was. By the time she came back upstairs, the rain had turned to a soft drizzle. Whoever had knocked was gone. She didn't explain, and I didn't ask, but something in her expression had changed. The quiet poise she carried before was thinner now, like a veil she'd folded back in a hurry. "You're still here," she said, almost surprised. "I said I'd finish," I replied, voice lower than I meant it to be. Her eyes drifted toward the open skylight. "You don't have to fix everything, you know." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I do." For a second, the corner of her mouth lifted, and then, just as quickly, it didn't. Later, we sat in the kitchen. The storm had passed, but the house still hummed with leftover electricity. She made tea, not for me, she said, just out of habit. Yet she poured a second cup. She leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise. "My husband used to say the roof was the heart of a house," she murmured. "Keep it steady, Everything else will last. I glanced up. He was right? He left, she said simply. So, maybe not. The silence afterward was soft, fragile. I wanted to say something that would fix that, too. But all I managed was, I'm sorry. She looked at me, a kind look, the kind that forgives you for things you didn't do. Don't be. You didn't break it. She turned then, reaching past me for a towel. Her arm brushed against mine, barely a touch, but enough to send a small shock through me. The scent of her perfume, the warmth of her body so close, made my throat tighten. I stepped back, pretending to adjust the cup. She noticed. Relax, she said softly. You look like you're about to bolt. I hesitated. I don't want to make things weird. Her smile this time was faint but knowing. We're already past weird, don't you think? I laughed once, quietly, and she turned away before I could see whether she meant it as a joke. We talked a little more, or rather, she talked. About her garden, her work-from-home job she didn't really like, how the quiet sometimes got too loud. I mostly listened. When she spoke, her voice carried a certain restraint, the kind that hides longing behind composure. I recognized it. I've used that same tone too many times in my own life. She asked me about myself, about why I worked repairs when I looked like someone who could have done something else. I shrugged. Maybe I just like fixing things I can see. Her gaze lingered then, steady, thoughtful, almost tender. Be careful, she said. That's how people like you get hurt. When I gathered my tools to leave, the rain had stopped entirely. She followed me to the door, barefoot again. I turned to say goodbye, but she stepped closer, close enough that her shoulder brushed my arm. You missed a spot, she said, reaching up to dust something from my sleeve. Her fingers stayed there a moment too long, tracing an invisible line before she withdrew them. Either of us spoke. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock and the faint breath she drew in before stepping back. See you tomorrow? I asked quietly. Her answer was almost a whisper. If it rains again. And when I walked away, I couldn't tell if I wanted the sky to stay clear, or break open all over again. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't go. The sky was clear, sunlight slanting across the street, no excuse to be there. But by noon, I found myself standing at her porch again, toolbox in hand, rehearsing reasons I didn't need. When she opened the door, she didn't hide her surprise. You came back, she said, voice soft but unreadable. You said if it rained? I replied. I guess I didn't want to wait for the weather. She hesitated, the smallest pause, then stepped aside. Come in, then. The house felt different in daylight. Brighter, warmer. The kind of light that exposes everything, even what you don't mean to show. She wore her hair up this time, loose strands brushing the side of her neck. I was just making coffee, she said. Do you want some? Sure. Our conversation stumbled between half-sentences and silence. Every sound, the spoon tapping against the mug, the low hum of the kettle, felt louder than it should. Then her phone buzzed. She picked it up, read the message, and her expression changed. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded too quickly. Just my friend Lena. She's dropping by to check in. When? Soon. The word hung between us, heavy with something unsaid. She moved to the living room, straightening cushions that didn't need it. I followed, pretending to check the ceiling. Our paths crossed near the window, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. You don't have to stay, she murmured. I know. But I didn't move. Her hand brushed the edge of the coffee table, fingers trembling slightly. People talk, you know. I don't care. Her eyes snapped up to mine, sharp, startled, and then softened. You should. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The sunlight shifted across the floor, glinting off her necklace. I reached out without thinking, just to touch the chain, to see if it was as warm as her skin, but stopped halfway. Don't, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. I dropped my hand. Sorry. She smiled faintly, trying to steady the moment. You always say that. The knock on the door came too soon. She froze, eyes darting to the hallway. That's her, she whispered. Instinctively, I stepped back, pressing into the shadow near the kitchen archway. She opened the door, laughter, voices, footsteps, and the world rushed in again. I could see them from where I stood, her and her friend, talking about nothing, pretending nothing had just almost happened. She was composed, polite, but every few seconds her gaze flicked toward me, a silent pulse of acknowledgement. Then Lena's eyes followed hers. Oh, you have company? Her voice faltered. He's just fixing the roof. Again. I managed a nod. Persistent leak? I said. Lena laughed, oblivious. Well, good thing you've got help. When she finally walked her friend out, the silence afterward was deafening. I turned to leave, but she reached for my arm, quick, desperate, and then stopped herself halfway, fingers curling into her palm. Her voice was barely audible. You should go, before I forget why I shouldn't ask you to stay. I hesitated, every muscle in me fighting the instinct to stay right there. I'll come back when it rains, I said. Her eyes met mine, that same mix of defiance and ache. Then I hope it doesn't stop. It rained again that evening, hard, relentless, like the sky had been waiting for its cue. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I told myself I'd let it pass. But by the time thunder rolled across the hills, I was already on her porch. She didn't look surprised this time. She just opened the door and stepped aside, wordless. The house was darker than before, the lights dim and golden. A candle flickered on the counter, its flame bending with every shift of air. I set my tools down but never reached for them. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I know. Then why are you? I didn't have an answer, or maybe I had too many. Because I can't stop thinking about being here. Her breath caught. Just a little. The rain was louder now, drumming against the windows, filling the silence between us. She crossed her arms, but her voice wavered. You're young. You don't know what this means. Then tell me, I said, stepping closer. Tell me to stop. She didn't. I could see the faint rise and fall of her chest, the pulse at her throat. She turned slightly, facing the window, but when I moved beside her, she didn't move away. Her reflection flickered in the glass, calm on the surface, trembling underneath. You think I haven't thought about this? She whispered. That I haven't tried to stop before it starts? My voice came out rougher than I intended. Then why haven't you? Her answer was silence. Then, softly, because you look at me like I'm still someone worth being looked at. The words hit harder than thunder. I reached out before I could think, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, like the touch itself was too much. My fingers lingered near her jaw, and I felt the warmth of her breath against my wrist. You shouldn't, she said again, but this time, it sounded more like a plea than a warning. Then stop me. Her eyes opened. There was no distance left between us. The candlelight caught in her eyes, soft, unsteady, alive. Every sense felt sharpened, the scent of rain, the quiet thrum of the house, the electricity humming in the inch of space between our lips. Her hand rose, hesitant, resting on my chest. You'll regret this, she whispered. Already do, I breathed. The words seemed to undo something in her. Her fingers tightened against me, her forehead brushed mine, just enough to make the world tilt. Then, from the hall, a sound, the sharp ring of her phone splitting through the silence. She froze. I could feel the tremor in her hand, the sudden retreat of breath. Neither of us moved. The phone kept ringing, insistent, pulling her back into the world she'd almost stepped out of. Her voice was a whisper now, raw and quiet. If I answer that, this never happened. I swallowed hard, the space between us trembling like a held note. Then don't. The phone stopped ringing after the third call. She didn't answer it, but something inside her had already shifted, the warmth in her eyes replaced by something harder to name. I stepped back, the air between us cooling, though the rain outside hadn't slowed. Was it him? I asked quietly. Her gaze flicked to me, startled. Who? Your husband. Her lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. He's not my husband anymore. But he still calls? Sometimes, she admitted. When he forgets we're finished. Her voice cracked on the last word, barely, but enough. She turned away, running a hand through her hair, pacing toward the counter. I should have told you, she said. You deserved to know before what? She met my eyes then, something raw breaking through her restraint. Before I let you make me feel alive again. The confession hit like lightning, sudden, bright, dangerous. For a long moment neither of us spoke. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the rain softening outside. I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to steady her, but she lifted her hand slightly, a warning or maybe a plea. You don't understand what this would mean, she said. If anyone found out, who would? I cut in too quickly. Her silence said it all. Then she looked at me, really looked, and something flickered in her eyes. You think I don't know how this looks? You think I haven't seen the way people glance at me when you're here? I swallowed hard. They don't know anything. They don't have to, she whispered. All they need is a story. The storm had quieted now. I could hear only the drip of water from the eaves and the sound of my own breathing. She leaned against the counter, hand covering her mouth like she was holding back words that might ruin everything. Then she said it, low, trembling. You shouldn't have come back. My throat tightened. You didn't want me to? She hesitated. I wanted you to. That's the problem. The truth between us felt heavier than any secret. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked up, wide, torn between resistance and need. You think I can just turn that off? I said softly. Pretend you don't stop time every time you look at me? Her fingers trembled at her side. Don't do this. I was close enough now to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Then tell me to go. She didn't. Instead, she reached for me, just a touch at first, the edge of her hand brushing my arm, then she froze, withdrawing as if burned. I can't, she said. I can't be the mistake you'll hate yourself for later. I caught her hand before she could pull it away. What if you're not? Her breath came unsteady, her eyes glistening. Then I'm the one who should know better. The sound of thunder rolled again, distant this time, not loud, but enough to make the lights flicker. She looked toward the window, her reflection framed in the glass. When she turned back, her voice was barely a whisper. If you come here tomorrow, I won't stop you again. Then she walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine, slow, deliberate, leaving the faint scent of rain and something like surrender in her wake. I didn't wait for the rain this time. By the next evening, the clouds hadn't even gathered yet, but I was already there, standing on her porch with nothing to fix except what had been left unfinished between us. She opened the door slowly. No smile this time, no pretense. Just the quiet weight of everything unsaid. You came, she said. You told me not to unless you meant it. Her eyes dropped to the ground. And if I didn't? Then you wouldn't have opened the door. That earned a small, broken laugh, the kind that hides more truth than comfort. She stepped aside, letting me in. The air inside was warm still. The candle from the last night's sat burned halfway down on the table. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said, crossing her arms, a fragile kind of defense. You did, I said quietly. You just hoped I wouldn't. She turned away, exhaling hard. This isn't fair. To who? To either of us. I stepped closer, slow enough to give her space to walk away, but she didn't. The silence stretched thin between us, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You make it hard to remember the reasons I built all these walls. My hand found the edge of the table beside her, close enough that the back of my fingers brushed her hip. Then let me help you take one down. She looked up at me then, really looked. All the restraint, all the fear, all the pretending, it cracked. You don't understand what this would cost me. I'm not asking for forever. I said. Just right now. Her breath trembled as she stepped forward, closing the distance that words had failed to bridge. The world outside disappeared. No thunder, no ticking clock, just the sound of two people finally too tired to keep pretending they didn't want what was already happening. Her hand lifted, hesitated midair, then rested against my chest. I could feel the shake in her fingers, the way she steadied herself on me, like she was both afraid and finally at peace. Say it, she whispered. Say what you're not supposed to. I swallowed, voice low, raw. I want you. Her eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment, everything stopped, even the air between us. When she looked up again, there was no hesitation left. Then stop waiting. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was everything before one. The brush of her forehead against mine, the warmth of her breath, the tremor that ran through both of us as if the house itself was holding its breath. Every emotion, guilt, longing, fear, collided and softened into something unspoken but undeniable. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet but sure. We can't undo this. I nodded, forehead still against hers. I don't want to. And in that stillness, no thunder, no lightning, just the quiet, steady rhythm of two hearts finally sinking, we understood. What had begun as a mistake had turned into something neither of us could call wrong anymore. Morning crept in slow, pale, and quiet, the kind of light that doesn't rush you, just lets the night dissolve. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving behind a damp calm, the faint smell of wet earth drifting through the half-open window. I sat at her kitchen table, the same one where everything had started. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't move. She was across from me, legs drawn up on the chair, hair loose and a little wild, softer now, like she'd finally stopped trying to be composed. Neither of us spoke for a while. Words felt too heavy after everything they'd carried. Finally, she broke the silence. You know this can't stay hidden forever. I know, I said. And you still want to be here? I looked at her, really looked. The faint lines around her eyes, the way her fingers wrapped around the mug like she was still deciding whether to hold on or let go. I didn't come here to hide, I said. I came because I don't feel lost here. Her lips parted, then curved, a small, unsure smile. You shouldn't have had to fix my roof to say that. I smiled back. I guess some repairs take longer than others. The clock ticked softly in the background, and a thin beam of sunlight cut across the counter, touching the side of her face. She reached across the table, hesitating only once before her fingers brushed mine, a simple touch, but it felt like an answer to everything we'd been too afraid to ask. People will talk, she murmured. Then let them, I said. Her thumb traced the back of my hand, slow, thoughtful. You'll change your mind one day. Maybe, I said, and meant it honestly. But not today. Her eyes softened. You really don't make this easy, do you? I think we stopped pretending it was easy a long time ago. She stood then, moving around the table. I turned slightly in my chair as she stopped beside me. Her hand slipped into my hair, gentle, uncertain, a gesture that said everything words couldn't. She leaned down, pressing her forehead to mine. The warmth of her skin, the faint scent of rain still clinging to her, it all felt too real, too fragile to question. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. I didn't answer. I just reached up, taking her hand and holding it against my cheek. We stayed like that, two people who had finally stopped running from what they'd both already chosen. No promises. No grand declarations. Just the quiet, steady rhythm of being together when they no longer had to hide it. Later, as the light filled the room, she sat beside me on the floor, her head resting on my shoulder. The world outside was starting again. Distant cars, faint voices, life moving on, but inside, everything felt still, repaired in its own imperfect way. Her voice came softly, almost teasing, almost tender. So, is the roof fixed now? I smiled, tightening my hand around hers. Yeah. I think it finally stopped leaking.